Hey y'all, welcome back to the channel. I'm Tinesha Davis, and in this video we're gonna talk about something I'm not gonna say very personal, but we're gonna talk about something personal. This is actually all about my firstborn tag, and while that sounds super innocent and super fun and super easy, for me it is super personal because it is I don't know. You know, for a lot of people, you just answer these questions. But for me, sometimes the answers are a little heavy. I don't know what they're going to be. I don't know. All I know is, let's just talk about it. This is all about my firstborn, a tag. I know that there have been a lot of people who have asked me different questions about my own experience, and I keep saying, oh, I'll make a video about it, I'll make a video about it, I'll make a video about it, and I've never gotten around to making a video about it. So this is an easy way through these questions for me to make a video about it. Page in the details below, as well as the questions in case you want to do this as well. And yours is probably can be a little easier because it's a little more normal. You probably have a normal pregnancy situation. Or maybe you don't. Maybe you have a unique situation like mine. So, situations, let's unite and talk about our firstborn. So there's 20 questions. Let's see how many we get through. Number 1, was your first pregnancy planned? No. Number 2, were you married? No. Number 3, what was your reaction to finding out? I cried. No, first I was in denial. All right, so let me tell you. I got pregnant the first time I had sex. And I wrote about this story. I wrote a short story about this story. Gosh, I wish I had the story on me, but I don't. So the name of the story was Surviving Amaru. Gosh, I really wish I had that story. Y'all need to know about that story. I'm like looking on Amazon right now, and because I was like, maybe they have an ebook, but they don't. And basically, I'm like looking at some of the reviews, and somebody wrote, I bought this book because I knew 2 of the writers, and I figured, hey, I'll skim through the book and give my friend a solid read. But I end up reading almost every piece and loving many. And then they go on and they talk about some of the pieces, and then they wrote, oh, and there's Tinesha Davis. Don't skim this book without stopping at Surviving Amaru. Absolutely fantastic. I'm so happy. Y'all did not come here to watch me cry again. The bottom line is I had my son at 16 years old. I got pregnant from my first boyfriend ever. I told you guys, I've had a hard childhood upbringing, all of that. And I think that story tells us so much. So we're just going to have to go back to that. So my reaction upon finding out that I was pregnant was first denial because we used protection. And his father came and he told me I was pregnant like the next day. The next day. I'm not pregnant. I remember during the act, I kind of like had an out-of-body experience because I was scared. So I don't remember. Well, not that I don't remember. I remember. But I was not checking for every move. Everything that was being done. It came out later that he removed the protection. So he knew what he did. And I didn't know that though. So when it was true that I was pregnant, I was 16. I was a straight A student. I was very studious. I followed all the rules. I was going to go to college. I knew what I wanted to do with my life. I was going to be somebody. I was going to succeed. Where does a child fit into all of that? So we said we would terminate the pregnancy. We would have an abortion. So we did not tell anybody that I was pregnant. I did not tell anybody that I was pregnant. No friends, no nothing. We both had jobs. I worked at the pizza place, Cal's Pizza. He worked at Food Lion. And so we would get paid every 2 weeks, and we would save our money to pay for the abortion. I want to call it something nice and delicate, like the procedure, but no, let's call it what it was, an abortion. Every time we would come up with the money, he would spend $10 at the arcade. It was silly. $20. Now we're $10 short. We're $20 short every time. So we have to wait for our next paycheck because, again, we weren't telling anybody. So we weren't going to friends or family to borrow money. This was just between us. So by the time we got our acts together and we got the money together to go to the abortion clinic, we skipped school, both of us being high school students. We took the city bus down there, Hillcrest, and I went in to be examined. I hadn't even been examined before then. So I went in. This was going to be my first examination. When I got in there, they told me that I was days over 14 weeks pregnant. They don't terminate pregnancies that far along. And so my survival skills kicked in. Let's get us some lip gloss. Because all I knew was I was a good girl. I was going to be the hope of my family. I had a whole future, not just for me, but for all those surrounding me. I was the person who was going to be this shining light of hope. How did I end up pregnant? And now this clinic is telling me there's nothing that they can do about it. So I told them I would kill myself. I am going to kill myself. I sat there, I cried, and I promised them I was going to kill myself. They didn't do anything. They didn't care. It didn't work. Next thing I know, me and him were back at the bus stop, and as I sat on the curb, and I cried and cried and cried. And I just think about that because I'm like, you know what? I wonder if anybody else had threatened to kill themselves at a hospital if something would have been done. Or I don't know. I mean, because desperation. I was really crying real tears. So how could you not take that seriously? But they did. And I wasn't going to kill myself. So then I went into denial. I just refused to accept the fact that I was pregnant. So even at 14 weeks, leaving that clinic, knowing I'm pregnant, knowing that there's nothing that anybody can do about it but me, I just waited. I said, you know what? Something's going to happen. Something has to happen. Something has to happen where I will not be pregnant anymore. So I'm not telling anybody. So I just did not tell anybody. So the next question, number 4, is, were you induced? No. The next question, number 5, how old were you? I was 16. The next question, number 7, these questions aren't in a very good order. Number 7, how did you find out? We covered that already. Number 8, did you want to find out the gender? I did not want to find out the gender. I don't even know if I ever found out the gender. Because more of the story, these questions aren't going into my story. More of the story is my family, my mother, my grandparents did not find out I was pregnant until I was 8 months. That meant I went an entire pregnancy without prenatal care. So with that, who cared about what a gender was going to be? Who cared about, was I on track? Was I not on track? I was a teenage girl who wanted to go to college. So all of those experiences that so many people had when they were pregnant, I did not have those experiences. What was your due date? March? I don't know. March? Did you deliver early or later than your due date? I don't know. I don't know. Back then, were those things of concern for a teenager? Did you have morning sickness? Every single day I have morning sickness. I don't even know when I stopped having morning sickness. I got fired from my job at Cal's Pizza because of morning sickness. Because again, I was not telling anybody I was pregnant, and I was still going to work in business as usual. I remember people would come in and I had to make subs. People would order roast beef. The word roast beef would make me throw up. Mayonnaise would make me throw up. People used to have to come and man my substation, so eventually they just fired me. But the G that I am, I went and I got another job at a clothing store with my aunt, pregnant. They didn't know I was pregnant. My top weight when I was pregnant was 135. I do remember that. So I really didn't show until my last month of being pregnant. I did not show. So therefore, I was able to still wear all my same clothes, and I was able to hide my pregnancy. How did they find out I was pregnant? I was at my grandmother's house because we all lived with my grandparents, me, my mom, two of my sisters, and my grandmother and my grandfather. And I was standing by the door, and my grandma said, "Your breast, you need to adjust your bra." And she just got up and she did like this. And I just started crying because she knew at 8 months. She knew. And then I remember my mom was like, "You're going to have an abortion." And I'm like, "I can't. It's too late. I'm about to have the baby. I'm about to have the baby." So who did you first tell? His father. And then at 8 months, that's when my family found out. What did you crave? I don't remember. It was so far back. I do remember I used to eat Twix, the candy bar, dipped in cheese. Remember the crackers with the little red spoon that had the little thing of cheese, and you would smear the cheese over the crackers? I used to smear that cheese over Twix candy bars. How many pounds did you gain? The thing about it is, like I told you, my top weight was 135, but here's the thing. As a 16-year-old girl who had her first sexual experience, I don't remember what my body looked like before being pregnant. I could not tell you what I weighed. I did not care about those things. I was still a girl. Like, I did not know anything about my figure. I could not tell you anything about, did I want to gain weight? Did I want to lose weight? I did not care. I did not care. So I don't even know. I can't even tell you. So the gender obviously was a boy. Y'all know him, Andre. Did you have complications during labor? Boy, did I. So I started having contractions. I remember I was eating spicy Chinese food. Then I started feeling the contractions. My grandfather and my mother and my grandmother, we all got in the car and he started taking me to the hospital. Riding over the bumps, they hurt. And I get to the hospital and it's all good. And they have me hooked up to the machine, the fetal monitoring machine and all of that. And his father's there and I'm there and we're all there. And then suddenly the machine just went silent. And when it went silent, his father tried to turn the machine louder, like maybe it's a volume thing. but it was done. It was nothing. Nothing. And so then a nurse came rushing into the room, and they started fidgeting with stuff and doing all of this stuff and talking really fast. And I just remember whatever they were saying, but everybody around me was panicking. My mother was yelling out, "It's going to be her or the baby. It's her or the baby." His father just fell out and started praying. And I remember they was putting the oxygen on my face, and I just kept saying, "Y'all, it's going to be fine. Everybody calm down." I was just really super calm about it. So what had happened was, and then another nurse came in, and she happened to be on shift that day, and she had experience with the situation. She had stuck her whole hand up into my vajayjay. I don't even think it hurt. I don't even remember it hurting. I did not have a epidural at this point, and it just was what it was. So she's on the bed with me with her hand up there, and they're wheeling me through the hall to the operating room. And again, my mom, him, like everybody's crying. I was just really calm, like, y'all, it's going to be good. It's going to be all right. And so they got me in there, and they had to do an emergency cesarean because my son had what was called a prolapse cord. The umbilical cord came out, but he was still in there. So that cut off his oxygen. It cut off his everything, which is why he died. He died. His heart stopped. And I remember thinking, like, all earlier, I did not want a baby. I did not want a baby. Something has to happen. Like, maybe a miscarriage or something or something or something. But at that point, I was thinking, but it's too late. Like, it's too late. I want all of that stuff to happen before anybody knew I was pregnant. I'm on a table. I'm about to have a son. This is not what I meant. I want my child. This is not what I meant. I want my child now. This is why in all that we do, we have to be conscious. And I was 16, so I didn't know any better. But we have to be mindful of our words, about the contracts and the agreements that we're making with this universe, what we're telling God. What are we telling God? Okay? My child died. And luckily, somebody was on staff that very night who had experience with prolapse cords. So she knew what to do. She knew what to do. And they got him out, and he survived. He made it. He made it. He survived. He survived. Andre, you survived. You survived. You survived. He survived so many times in his life. He survived. So many times in his life. I don't think he knows that he survived. How many times he has survived. And you're surviving for a reason. You're surviving for a purpose. You are purposed. You are purposed. Even when I tried to get rid of you, even when I tried as a 16-year-old, you survived. You survived me. You survived your dad. You survived delivery. You survived epilepsy. You survived all of those seizures that you would have. All of the times that you've been hospitalized by yourself when I wasn't there. When my mother did not have the resources to be there. When my 10-year-old sister was the only person who could be in a hospital with you to try to be the person of authority, a 10-year-old. You survived all of that. You survived. What's the next question? Where did you give birth? in Virginia Beach, Virginia. How many hours were you in labor for? Hell if I know. How much did your baby weigh? I don't know. Somewhere between 6 and 7 pounds. I believe he weighed 6 pounds, 13 ounces. I think that's what's coming to mind. 6 pounds, let's go with that. 6 pounds, 13 ounces. What did you name your baby? Andre, after his father. Saquon, because I felt like that was the prettiest name ever. I had a friend and she had a nephew named Saquon. And I was like, oh, that name is so pretty. So Andre Saquon Tucker. He got his father's last name. Why? Because we're going to get married anyway, Ma. And how old is your firstborn today? My son, Andre Saquon Tucker, the survivor, is 27 years old. Thank y'all for watching this video and for listening to my journey. And I want to say that I know that to this day that there's a lot of young girls who found themselves or are finding themselves in a position like I was once in. And all I want to say is, after all is said and done, we are survivors. I survived, my son survived, and you are surviving as well. If you can look at anything on my channel, you see the budgets, you see the trips, you see the lifestyle that I have built for myself. And I am still that 16-year-old single mother, teenage mother, who took my show on a road 3 months after my son was born. I left home with him and have been on my own ever since. Ever since. Everything that you see, every success, every tear, I have never failed. All of that was done by my sheer will and determination to fulfill that thing that I said I was meant to fulfill. I was meant to be a beacon of light. I was meant to go to college. I was meant to be hope in my family. I was meant to have a future and to build something for my family. And even with a baby attached to my back, sitting on my hip, not attached to my breast, because believe it or not, they didn't even ask me if I wanted to breastfeed as a 16-year-old. They just gave me the pill to dry my milk up, and I wasn't given that option. But let's just say the spirit of the baby attached to my bosom, I was still able to accomplish all of those things with no excuses. No excuses. When obstacles popped up, I just went harder. Because I was like, you know what? We are still going to fulfill, and we're still going to be, and we're still going to do everything I ever said I wanted to do. I still graduated on time. There's a lot of stories that went with that too. I still went to college. I still ended up in a wonderful profession as a woman who was a 16-year-old teenage mom. So that would be my message to you all. We are survivors. You are a survivor. You will survive. Tell God what you want. Your desires, your dreams, your all things good. And it will come to pass. It will come to pass. Thank you guys. And again, until the next video. Peace. I was the new girl with the dry, brittle hair and a pair of ran-down sneakers. The kids at this school teased me. It was April. The school year was coming to a close. This is what the kids joked, the shoes. The sneakers were white with black lettering, no frills, Reeboks. The R's that were necessary to spell out the brand name had faded to white. All that was left to show that at one time the shoes could have been stylish were the letters E-E-B-O-K. My father had a problem. That's why I had been uprooted from my old school. It was also the reason there wasn't money for new shoes. 2. I made a friend, a popular comedian of a boy who'd hold long conversations with me when we weren't in school. On rusty chain swings we sat and I blurted out these words. My father smokes crack. Now he's locked up. And then in an instant, I was crushed under the grief and the weight of it all. That's why my sneakers look like this, I choked out. And it was true. They were ran down because I've been running and fighting and surviving. My sneakers carried me. But now I had the swing and I was going down hard. Me, my mother, and 2 of my sisters lived with my grandparents in their 2-bedroom townhouse. I was kicking out my legs to come back up. Another sister stayed with an aunt and her family. I was sinking again. The swing was as beat up as my sneakers. It held me. And he, who was already 16, sat and rocked on this swing beside me, silent, listening, not asking a single question. This consoled me more than any hug could. After all, we were their kids, a generation that grew up under a president's missus who told us to just say no. How was I the daughter of a father who just couldn't? This was bigger than embarrassment. It was doom. I was doomed to a legacy of hard-headed failure, and this is what crushed me. Could I really escape failing? I sat on a swing, no longer pretending I wasn't. I folded, and he caught me. He didn't judge me. He just caught me. 3. In June, I turned 16. For my birthday, he purchased me a pair of black-on-black Reeboks. He saved his Food Lion bagger money to do this. I was impressed. A job was not easy to come by for a grown person, never mind a child like me. I was grateful. No one outside of my family had ever cared about me enough to spend 30 of their hard-earned bucks on something for me before. Something that I could really use. Something that could stop the new school kids from laughing at me. I wanted to let him know how much his gift meant. I wanted to say thank you, so I decided to give him the only thing that I thought I could afford. My virginity. 4. We decided on Lake Edward Apartments. It was across the street from where I lived. There was a vacant apartment that he knew how to break into. It was decided that I would bring the boombox. This would add a touch of class. He provided the blanket and the protection. It was after my shift at Cal's, around midnight, when we met. I smelled heavy of onions and marinara sauce. He smelled musky sweet, like he knew what he was doing. 5. I was shoving books into my locker when he came up to me. You're pregnant, he said with the same emotion he would have used if he told me I was pretty. I punched him in the arm and told him that wasn't funny. I smiled. Now that I had the new shoes, he talked to me in the open. In the middle of making a roast beef sub, I threw up. Then mayonnaise started sending me running to the toilet too. I spent shifts sitting on the floor by the pizza dough rack, face pressed against the cool metal. Eventually, Cal's fired me. 6. We skipped school. It took weeks to get it right, to stop waiting on another paycheck because he spent $5 here or 10 there. Now that we had the money, we cut school and caught the city bus to East Little Creek Road, Hillcrest, simply because things like this didn't happen to girls like me. I was a straight A and B student. I was going to be a writer. My teachers liked me. My grandparents had hope for me. And thanks to my father, I didn't experiment with drugs or alcohol. No, things like this didn't happen to good girls like me. Then the results came back. I was 14 weeks pregnant. Things like this did happen to people like me. And now I was so far along that Hillcrest couldn't help me fix it. At the bus stop, we waited. He waited to go back to the neighborhood that got me in this trouble. I waited for a bus, a taxi, a miracle to hit me. I didn't have to be crushed. I was found that way. I set my broken self on the bus stop curb and cried. 7. I hid the pregnancy, got another job, kept on going to school, secretly had blackouts in the girls' bathroom, secretly threw up in my grandparents' toilet, secretly tried to be 16 and good again. I really did think that it would disappear, that I wouldn't have to confess my sins to my grandmother, the woman who was the first editor of my poems, the woman who told me to get involved in everything, the woman I did not want to disappoint, so I forewent prenatal checkups and pills. I forewent learning if there were other options for me, and I went about hiding the pregnancy while waiting for something to happen. 8. Something happened. My grandmother told me my chest was sagging, and in a breath she was on me, measuring the heavy weight of my breast by jerking up on my spaghetti bra strap. I burst into tears. This confirmed it. I was 16, 137 pounds, and 8 months pregnant. 9. His heart stopped beating. Before he was born, before he took his first breath of air, his heart stopped. And our solution was to turn the knob on the fetal monitor up. We were convinced it was nothing more than a malfunctioning speaker. A volume adjustment would fix it. After all, that's what happened to the boombox I was in charge of. Now that my grandparents and mother knew, I decided that being a mommy wasn't going to be that bad. It was too late for the something I was waiting on to happen. Turn the machine louder, I told his father. This is the loudest it'll go, he told me back. Then in came the nurses, then in came the doctor, then in came the confusion. The umbilical cord came out of my womb. My baby did not. A nurse hopped on the bed with me and stuck her hand inside. My child had no air. My child had no heartbeat. She had to get him back, so she had to perform a CPR of sorts. Him being inside of me was the only obstacle. 10. March 13th, 1993. By emergency cesarean, my son survived. No one could tell us the side effects of going so long without a beating heart. 11. At night, we stayed up and cried together. I went through the routine checks they taught me. Hungry, wet, cold, 3 a.m., what was wrong? I paced the bedroom floor with him in my arms. I have to go to school. I whined to the baby. Tell me what to do, I begged. He cried louder. I did too. 12. We both threw fits, the baby and I. One day, one of my tantrums got us kicked out of my grandparents' home. I was 17, a high school senior. We took our show on the road. We were survivors. And I could have been a high school dropout, but we were given an angel, a 14-year-old pot smoker who went by the name of Ice Cream. He had been kicked out of school for having a gun, loaded. He kept my 3-month-old son. He was my chance at defying statistics. I'd like to think we were brave children. all three of us. 13. The angels kept coming. When Amaru was 1, a family of trash pickers roamed our neighborhood. Dull, stained clothes, oily brown hair, pink, blotchy hands, picking through the nasty, dirty trash of strangers. They were bums. A mother, a father, a teenage son. They had to be homeless. They certainly were crazy. And when Amaru was 1, he did a funny thing. He fell and rolled his eyes to the back of his head. I picked him up and told him to stop, but he was limp. His small head wobbled on his neck. His small eyes wobbled in their sockets. His mouth began to foam. I went through the checks, hungry, wet, cold. I began to cry. He began to shake. I dialed 911, not full. I dialed 911, not full sure if this was an emergency. I certainly had never seen anything like it, but I wasn't sure if people like us could be considered emergencies, so I hung up the phone. 911 called me back. And over the phone line, I managed to blubber out what was happening. I was a teenager. I had a son. He wouldn't stop shaking. Help was on the way. A knock came to the door. First to arrive on the scene, the family of street roamers, trash pickers. They heard my cry over their CB radio. They were out of breath. They ran blocks to get to my house from their home. They helped me lay my baby down. The father took the phone and spoke to the emergency operator. The mother watched over my child as he shook. The teenage son went outside to flag down the ambulance. I did nothing. I rocked, I cried. Amaru kept shaking. 14. At times, he'd have 10 or 20 seizures a day. Back to back, for no reason the doctors could find. At times, he spent weeks in hospitals, under observations, under study, under watch, over medicated. We were learning to live with it. We were still learning how to survive. I was still learning how to be a mommy. If he complains his liver hurts, rush him in. But doctor, he's 1. If his lips turn blue, start mouth to mouth. He's small for 2, so you have to do it like this. At times he'd wear diapers, wouldn't talk, couldn't walk. I tell the doctors this, and all of them told me they were side effects from the medications. Normal. One day he writes a poem. When the wind blows, I spread my wings and fly. I'm an eagle, fallen to the earth. I look up and see an angel. He says the poem is about the day he was born. He is 4. He knows nothing about his stopping heart, and I know nothing about what he goes through when he seizures. 15. And just like that, my mother becomes an angel too. Amidst all of this, she allows me to go into the military while she takes guardianship over my 6th son. On her watch, he has chicken pox, discovers his testicles, and sits in a studio to smile for professional pictures. He's happy. One day he gets punched in the stomach, making him throw up in the school cafeteria. He's embarrassed. I'm in Korea. He wants to live with me. He says over the phone line. I tell him all the reasons why he can't. I have to get us a better life. We cry. 16. When I arrive back to the States, I get him back. And on my watch, he has to repeat the 1st grade, becomes a latchkey kid, and grows accustomed to not being in the same school for more than 2 years in a row. On my watch, he learns to take care of himself. He catches his own teeth in McDonald's napkins. He finds his old salt water rinses. On my watch, he learns not to complain, not to form bonds. This is our surviving. He is 9, and at his 5th new school, he hasn't yet learned his new bus stop, but he has taught himself how to find our high-rise apartment in the sky. He keeps his eye on it. It's his compass as he climbs over fences and fights his way through brush. He crosses streets and hops over obstacles. When he finally makes it home, he uses a footstool to reach the keypad to punch in a code that'll open the building's door for him. When I finally come home from work, I yell. His pants are torn. 17. Amaru is 17 now. As his mother, I get no credit. He was my parent first, lifetimes ago, he tells me. He even takes credit for the miracle of his birth. I birthed myself. You were a portal. We laugh. He chose me as a parent. This gets me off the hook. He is an easy son, not too needy or clingy or sneaky. He knows the story of my father. He's been there through our survival. He knows the power of a hug. Outside of the seizures he stopped having by 8, he has never been a sickly child, never an earache or a nosebleed or an upset stomach. Tonight he comes downstairs from his 4th floor suite and tells me he's been calling me on my cell phone. He needs me. What's the matter? My stomach hurts. I feel weak. I look at him. We've never been here before, so I ask him a profound question. What do you want me to do? Ma, he whines and slides down to the kitchen's wooden floor. I slide down too. He leans against the cabinet of the sink. I lean against the refrigerator. We face each other. I search in my head for all the remedies I've seen TV mothers exact. Solutions I may have read about in books. Do you want Pepto-Bismol or milk of magnesia? What's that? I don't know. I think it's for upset stomachs or something. Nah. Want my leftover fish and corn cakes? Nah, food sounds nasty. Ginger ale, soup, warm milk? He shakes his head. I know. What about hot tea? I can make it for you. He hears me get excited. He's no longer that crying baby who can't communicate his needs. This time he helps me. Okay, maybe some tea. Cold. He gets up and gets himself a mug out of the cabinet. I get up and pour Turkey Hill lemonade tea into it. This is the only mommying I know. And I know I'm terrible at it. But it's the only mommying he knows. So once again, he survives.